Imagine being so successful that you have everything money can buy, but your own daughter hasn't smiled in years. Victoria Hale built a tech empire, but lost something precious along the way until a cleaning lady showed her what she'd been missing all along. Before we dive into this emotional journey, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The mansion stood silent that Monday morning, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers that had witnessed too many quiet breakfasts. I pulled my beat-up Honda into the circular driveway, staring up at the Hale mansion. 3 stories of glass and steel that screamed money, the kind I'd never have. My hands shook as I grabbed my cleaning supplies from the trunk. This job paid 3 times what I made at the hotel, but rich people scared me. They looked right through you like you were invisible. The front door opened before I could knock. "You must be Grace Miller." The woman standing there was stunning in that cold, untouchable way. Sharp suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, eyes like winter. "I'm Victoria Hale." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for hiring me." She didn't smile, just stepped aside. The previous maid left detailed instructions. "You'll work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. I have meetings all day, so we won't cross paths often." The house felt like a museum. Everything white, gray, or black. No family photos, no warmth, just expensive emptiness that echoed with loneliness. "My daughter Emily is 8, Victoria continued, her voice softer now. She has special needs, autism. She won't bother you, but if you see her, just leave her alone. She doesn't like strangers." Something in her tone made my chest tight, like she was protecting herself as much as her daughter. The way she said autism like it was a disease instead of just a different way of being. "Of course," I whispered. Victoria's heels clicked against marble as she walked away. "The supply closet is down that hall. I'll be in my office." Alone, I stood in that massive foyer, listening to silence so thick it felt heavy. No TV sounds, no laughter, no music, just the hum of expensive air conditioning and the weight of unspoken sadness. I started in the living room, dusting furniture that probably cost more than my car. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see a backyard that looked like a magazine spread. Perfect grass, perfect flowers, perfect and empty, like everything else in this house. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, light, careful ones. I turned and saw her. A little girl with dark hair like her mother's, wearing a purple dress that was too fancy for a Tuesday morning. She stood at the top of the staircase, watching me with huge brown eyes that held more wisdom than any 8-year-old should possess. Emily. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared like she was trying to figure out if I was real or just another disappointment in a house full of them. "Hi there," I said softly, not moving closer. "I'm Grace." She tilted her head slightly, studying me with those incredible eyes. Then she turned and disappeared down the hallway like a ghost. My heart broke a little. In that brief moment, I'd seen something that made my chest ache. Loneliness. The same kind I felt every night in my tiny apartment, eating dinner alone while wondering if anyone would notice if I just vanished. But this was different. This was a child who lived in a palace but felt like a prisoner. I kept cleaning but couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. So aware, so sad, so hungry, like she was starving for something that had nothing to do with food. Connection, maybe understanding. Someone who saw her as more than a diagnosis. Around noon, I was vacuuming the hallway when I heard Victoria on a conference call in her office. Her voice was sharp, commanding, completely different from the careful way she'd spoken about Emily. "The quarterly projections are unacceptable. I want solutions, not excuses. We didn't build this company to accept mediocrity, power, control, success, everything I'd never had." But as I looked around this beautiful, silent house, I wondered if maybe I was the lucky one after all, because at least when I went home to my cramped apartment, I could cry if I wanted to. I could laugh at stupid TV shows. I could be human. This place felt like a tomb where emotions went to die. I finished the downstairs and was heading to the kitchen when I saw Emily again. She was sitting at the breakfast bar, eating a sandwich with mechanical precision. No mess, no joy, just fuel for her body. Everything about her posture screamed careful control, like she was afraid of taking up too much space. She looked up when I entered, and for a second our eyes met. I smiled. "That looks good." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. There was something in her gaze, curiosity maybe, or hope. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to leave this little girl alone. The afternoon passed quietly. I cleaned bathrooms that sparkled like jewelry stores, organized closets that held more clothes than most people owned, and polished surfaces that already gleamed. But my mind kept drifting to Emily. How long had she been this quiet, this isolated? Victoria spoke about her daughter like she was fragile, breakable, something to be protected rather than engaged with. But I'd seen something different in those brown eyes. Intelligence, awareness, a little girl trapped behind walls of silence, waiting for someone to notice she was there. Around 3, I was dusting the second-floor hallway when I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Music. Soft, classical, drifting from behind a closed door. I'd never seen inside Emily's room. Victoria had made it clear that was off limits. But the melody was so beautiful, so unexpected in this silent house, that I found myself drawn toward it like a moth to flame. I pressed my ear to the door, heart pounding. The music swelled, and I heard something else. Movement, gentle, rhythmic, purposeful. Someone was dancing in there. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I shouldn't. Victoria would fire me. But something about that music, about the careful movements I could sense beyond the door, made me ache with curiosity and recognition. This little girl, who everyone thought was unreachable, was dancing alone in her room. I knocked softly. "Emily, it's Grace." The movement stopped. Silence stretched like a held breath. I heard the music. It's beautiful. More silence. Then so quietly I almost missed it. The sound of footsteps approaching the door. The knob turned slowly, and Emily appeared in the crack, her dark eyes wide and uncertain. Behind her, I could see a room that was nothing like the rest of the house. Colorful drawings covered the walls. Books were scattered across a reading nook. A small stereo sat on her dresser, still playing that haunting melody. But what made my breath catch was Emily herself. She was wearing a flowing white nightgown despite it being afternoon, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked like a little fairy who'd been trapped in a corporate prison. "Can I come in?" I whispered. She hesitated for what felt like an eternity, then stepped back just enough to let me pass. The room was her sanctuary. Every surface told a story. Drawings of dancers, books about music, a collection of snow globes that caught the afternoon light like tiny worlds. This wasn't the room of a broken child. This was the room of an artist. "You like to dance," I said, noticing the way she'd been moving when I first heard the music. Emily nodded once, barely perceptible. "I used to dance too, when I was your age." I sat on the floor, making myself smaller, less threatening. "My mom taught me in our kitchen. We didn't have much money for lessons, but we had music and love. That was enough." Emily moved closer, her bare feet silent on the carpet. "Would you like to show me?" I asked gently. She shook her head quickly, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "That's okay. Maybe tomorrow." Emily looked at me for a long moment, those wise eyes searching my face for something. Trust, maybe, or the promise that I wouldn't disappear like everyone else seemed to do. Finally, she nodded just once, but it was enough. I left her room with my heart racing, knowing I'd crossed a line that could cost me my job. But as I finished my cleaning duties, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment when Emily had nodded. She wasn't broken. She wasn't unreachable. She was just a little girl who needed someone to see her magic and help her share it with the world. Tomorrow, I was going to ask her to dance with me. And maybe, just maybe, I could help bring music back to this silent house. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's room. That explosion of color and creativity, hidden behind a closed door in an otherwise sterile house. The contrast was heartbreaking. Here was this brilliant little girl, full of art and music and movement, trapped in a world that saw only her limitations. The next morning, I arrived at the mansion with my heart hammering against my ribs. Victoria was already gone, some early meeting downtown, and the house felt expectant, like it was holding its breath for something beautiful to happen. I went through my usual routine, but my mind kept drifting upstairs. Would Emily remember our moment? Would she want to see me again? Or had I imagined that flicker of connection in her eyes? Around 10, I heard it. The same classical music drifting down from her room like an invitation. This time, I didn't hesitate. I climbed the stairs, my cleaning supplies forgotten, and knocked gently on Emily's door. "Emily, it's Grace." The music stopped. Footsteps. The door opened wider this time, and Emily stood there in a yellow dress, her hair braided with small ribbons. She dressed up for me. My throat tightened with emotion. "You look beautiful." She stepped aside, letting me into her colorful sanctuary. The stereo was playing a different piece today, something lighter, more playful. Vivaldi, maybe the kind of music that made you want to spin and laugh and forget about everything except joy. "I brought this," I said, pulling out my phone. "It's a playlist my mom made for me when I was little. Songs that make you want to move." Emily watched with fascination as I connected my phone to her stereo. The first song began, an old jazz standard that always made me think of dancing in the rain with my arms outstretched. "This one's special," I said. "It's about finding joy even when things are hard, even when the world feels too big and scary." Emily stared at my phone, then at me. I could see the war happening behind her eyes. Want versus fear. Longing versus the safety of staying hidden. "You don't have to dance," I said softly. "We can just listen. Sometimes that's enough." But then, something magical happened. Emily began to sway just slightly, her body responding to the music despite all her careful walls. Her movements were tentative at first, like she was testing whether it was safe to let herself feel. "You feel it too, don't you?" I whispered. She nodded, and for the first time since I'd started working here, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not quite joy, but possibility, hope, the beginning of trust. I stood slowly and began to move, simple steps that matched the music's gentle rhythm. Nothing fancy, just the basic movements my mother had taught me 20 years ago in our tiny kitchen while dinner burned on the stove and bills piled up on the counter. "Dancing isn't about being perfect," I said, still moving. "It's about feeling the music in your heart and letting your body follow. It's about being brave enough to take up space in the world." Emily watched, transfixed. Her swaying became more pronounced, more confident. I could see her natural grace emerging like a butterfly testing its wings. "That's it," I encouraged. "Feel the music. Let it tell your body what to do. There's no wrong way." The song built to a playful crescendo, and Emily's movements became bolder. She lifted her arms, spun slowly, her dress flaring out like a sunflower. There was such natural rhythm in her body, such intuitive understanding of how movement could express what words couldn't. When the music ended, we stood there in the sudden silence, looking at each other. Emily's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen before. "That was beautiful," I whispered. Emily smiled then. Not the full, radiant smile that would come later, but a small, tentative upturn of her lips that made my heart soar like a bird taking flight. "Tomorrow?" I asked softly. Emily nodded more decisively this time. Then she did something that surprised me. She walked to her art supplies and picked up a crayon, drawing quickly on a piece of paper. When she finished, she handed it to me. It was us dancing together, surrounded by musical notes that seemed to float off the page. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "Grace and Emily, friends." "This is beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Can I keep it?" Emily nodded eagerly, then surprised me again by speaking. "You make the music happy," she said simply. I didn't understand what she meant until later, when I was cleaning the downstairs and heard something I'd never heard before in the Hale mansion. Emily was humming. The sound drifted down from her room, a sweet melody that seemed to bring life to the sterile hallways. For the first time since I'd started working here, the house felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. As I worked, I found myself humming along, and I realized what Emily had meant. Music had always been in this house, trapped in her room, hidden behind closed doors, suffocating in silence. But now it was escaping, filling the empty spaces with joy and possibility. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. I cleaned mechanically, my mind replaying those moments when Emily had moved to the music. There was such grace in her movements, such natural rhythm. She wasn't broken or damaged. She was a dancer waiting to be discovered. Around Dre, I was organizing the kitchen when I heard Victoria's car in the driveway. She was home early. I quickly finished what I was doing and gathered my supplies, not wanting to overstay my welcome. But as I headed toward the front door, Victoria appeared in the hallway. "Grace, wait," she called. I turned, expecting to be questioned about my time upstairs. But Victoria's expression was different, softer, somehow, confused, but hopeful. "How was Emily today?" she asked. She's wonderful," I said carefully. "Very creative, very intelligent, very musical." Victoria's face tightened slightly. "Did she speak to you?" I hesitated. "Not many words, but she communicates in other ways, beautiful ways." The doctors say she may never be fully social, Victoria said, her voice flat and defeated. That we need to manage our expectations, accept limitations. My heart ached for both of them. Sometimes doctors don't see everything, I said gently. Sometimes they focus so much on what's different that they miss what's extraordinary. Victoria looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I mean, Emily is more aware, more engaged, more brilliant than anyone realizes. She just expresses herself differently. And maybe that's not a limitation. Maybe that's a gift. Victoria stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. Hope, maybe, or fear of hope. The kind of fear that comes from wanting something so badly you're afraid to believe it's possible. I should go, I said softly. Grace, Victoria called as I reached the door. Thank you for seeing her, for caring. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I drove home to my tiny apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness I'd seen in both their faces. Emily, isolated by her differences. Victoria, isolated by her fear of failing her daughter again. But I'd also seen something else today. I'd seen Emily respond to music, to movement, to simple human connection. She wasn't lost. She was just waiting for someone to find the right key to unlock her world. And tomorrow, I was going to try again because every child deserves to dance. Every child deserves to be seen for who they really are, not who the world expects them to be. Emily was a dancer, a beautiful, graceful, joyful dancer, trapped in a world that didn't understand her language. But I was beginning to learn it, and I wasn't going to stop until everyone else could see what I saw. A little girl full of music and light, just waiting for someone to ask her to dance. The third day, I arrived at the mansion with a small gift hidden in my cleaning bag, a silk scarf my mother had given me years ago. It was pale blue with silver threads that caught the light when it moved, perfect for dancing. Mom used to say that scarves made music visible, turned sound into something you could touch and hold. Victoria was already gone, but I noticed something different. The house felt less oppressive somehow, like the walls themselves were anticipating something beautiful. Even the morning light seemed warmer as it streamed through those massive windows. I completed my morning routine quickly, eager to get upstairs. When I knocked on Emily's door, it opened immediately. She'd been waiting for me. Today, she wore a white dress that made her look like a little angel, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the light like spun gold. But it was her eyes that stopped my breath. They were bright with anticipation, alive in a way I'd never seen before. Good morning, beautiful, I said softly. Emily smiled, that same tentative smile from yesterday, and stepped aside to let me in. Her room felt different too, more welcoming, like she'd been preparing for my arrival. I brought you something, I said, pulling out the scarf. For dancing. Emily's eyes widened as I held up the silk fabric. It fluttered in the air like water, catching the morning light streaming through her windows and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. My mother used to dance with scarves like this, I explained. She said they made the music visible, that they helped your body paint pictures in the air. I put on our playlist from yesterday, and as the first notes filled the room, I began to move with the scarf. It flowed around me like liquid light, creating patterns in the air that seemed to paint the music itself. Emily watched, mesmerized, her body already beginning to sway in response to the rhythm. Want to try? I asked, offering her one end of the scarf. She hesitated for just a moment, then reached out and took the silk in her small hands. Magic happened. The moment Emily touched the scarf, something unlocked inside her. She began to move with a natural grace that took my breath away, the silk flowing around her like she'd been born to dance with it. Her movements were fluid, intuitive, absolutely beautiful. We moved together, connected by the scarf and the music, and I watched Emily transform before my eyes. Her movements became bolder, more confident. She experimented with spins, with arm positions, with the way the fabric could create shapes in the air like living art. And then, during a particularly joyful passage of music, Emily threw back her head and laughed. The sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds, pure, uninhibited joy that filled every corner of the room and seemed to chase away years of silence and sadness. There you are, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. There's my dancing girl. Emily spun toward me, the scarf creating a silver-blue tornado around her. And when she stopped, she was smiling. Not the tentative smile from before, but a radiant, full-faced smile that transformed her completely. You're beautiful when you dance, I told her. Emily's smile grew even brighter. and she whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Thank you." My heart stopped. Those were the first words she'd ever spoken to me. "Thank you for dancing with me," I whispered back. We danced through 5 more songs, and with each one, Emily became more herself. She was fearless, creative, absolutely radiant. The scarf became an extension of her body, flowing and spinning and creating beauty in the air. She tried new movements, experimented with different ways of holding the fabric, discovered how her body could express emotions that words couldn't capture. There was such natural rhythm in her, such intuitive understanding of how movement and music could become one. When we finally collapsed onto her reading nook, both breathing hard and grinning, Emily did something that shocked me. She hugged me. It was quick, almost shy, but it was real. This little girl, who supposedly didn't like physical contact, had just chosen to embrace me. "I love dancing," she whispered against my shoulder. "I can tell," I said, smoothing her hair. "You're a natural, a real dancer." Emily pulled back and looked at me with those wise brown eyes. "Will you teach me more?" "Every day," I promised, "if you want." She nodded eagerly, then picked up a crayon and paper from her art supplies. I watched as she drew quickly, her small hands moving with the same grace she'd shown while dancing. When she finished, she handed me the drawing. It was us dancing with the scarf, surrounded by musical notes that seemed to float off the page. But this time, there was something new. Both figures in the drawing were smiling, huge, joyful smiles that radiated happiness. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "Grace and Emily, dancing friends forever." "This is beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Can I keep it?" Emily nodded, then surprised me again by speaking. "You make the music happy," she said, "just like yesterday, and you make me happy too." I didn't fully understand what she meant about the music until later when I was cleaning the downstairs and heard something that made me stop in my tracks. Emily was humming again, but this time it was different, louder, more confident. The melody drifted down from her room and seemed to fill the entire house with warmth and life. For the first time since I'd started working here, the mansion felt like a home instead of a museum. The music was escaping Emily's room, flowing through the hallways, bringing joy to spaces that had been silent for too long. As I worked, I found myself humming along, and I realized what Emily had meant. Music had always been trapped in this house, locked away, hidden, suffocated by silence and sadness. But now it was free, filling the empty spaces with possibility and hope. The rest of the day passed in a blur of happiness. I cleaned with a lightness in my step, my heart singing with the memory of Emily's laughter. This little girl, who everyone thought was unreachable, had just shown me a joy so pure, it made everything else fade away. Around 3, I was organizing the kitchen when I heard Victoria's car in the driveway. She was home early again. I quickly finished what I was doing, but as I headed toward the front door, Victoria appeared in the hallway. She stopped in the foyer and tilted her head, listening. "Is that," she started. "Emily," I said softly. "She's humming." Victoria's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, wonder, and something that looked like grief. "She used to hum," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Before the divorce, before everything fell apart. I'd forgotten she used to fill the house with music." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What did you do? What did you do?" "I danced with her," I said simply. Victoria stared at me for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the cold, professional smile I'd seen before, but something real and warm and transformative. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for bringing music back to this house, for bringing my daughter back to life." As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily's transformation. In just 3 days, she'd gone from silent and withdrawn to dancing and humming and speaking. She wasn't broken. She'd never been broken. She was just a little girl who needed someone to see her magic and help her share it with the world. And tomorrow, we were going to dance again. I arrived at work the next morning to find Victoria still at home, pacing in the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. She was dressed for the office in her usual sharp suit, but something was different. Her movements were agitated, her usual composed demeanor cracked like ice, beginning to thaw. "I don't care what the board thinks," she was saying, her voice sharp with frustration. "Reschedule the meeting. Something more important came up." She ended the call and noticed me standing in the doorway, my cleaning supplies in hand. "Grace," she said, her voice strained. I'm working from home today. I hope that's not a problem. Of course not, I said, though my heart sank. Emily and I wouldn't be able to have our dance session with Victoria in the house. The magic we'd been building might be interrupted by her mother's presence. But as the morning progressed, I realized Victoria wasn't working. She was listening. Every time music drifted down from Emily's room, Victoria would stop whatever she was pretending to do and tilt her head toward the ceiling. When Emily's laughter echoed through the hallways, Victoria's face would soften with an expression of wonder and longing that made my chest tight. She was hungry for connection with her daughter, but didn't know how to bridge the gap that had grown between them. Around 10, I couldn't stand it anymore. "She's waiting for you," I said softly. Victoria looked up from her laptop where she'd been staring at the same email for 20 minutes without reading a single word. "What, Emily?" "She keeps looking toward the stairs, listening for your footsteps. She wants to share this with you." Victoria's face went pale. "She doesn't. We don't. I wouldn't know what to do." The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Here was this powerful woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires, admitting she felt helpless when it came to connecting with her own daughter. "You don't have to do anything," I said gently. "Just be present. Just see her." Victoria stared at me for a long moment, fear and hope warring in her expression like storm clouds gathering. "What if I ruin it?" she whispered. "What if my being there makes her shut down again? What if I'm the reason she's been so quiet all this time? What if you're not?" I countered. "What if she's been waiting for you to see her magic?" Just then, we heard Emily's voice calling from upstairs, clear and bright. "Grace, can we dance now?" Victoria's breath caught audibly. "She's talking." "She's been talking," I said softly. "You just haven't been listening." Victoria stood slowly, her hands shaking like leaves in a storm. "I don't know how to be her mother anymore. I don't know how to connect with her." "Yes, you do," I said firmly. "You're her mother. That connection is already there. It's just buried under fear and guilt and all the things that don't matter." Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a pink dress and holding the blue scarf I'd given her. The silk caught the light streaming through the windows, making her look like she was wrapped in water and sky. "Grace," she called, then stopped when she saw Victoria. Her face went carefully neutral the way it always did around her mother. The walls going up, the light dimming. "Hi, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily tilted her head, studying her mother's face with those wise brown eyes. "You're not at work." "I wanted to be home today," Victoria said, "with you." Emily considered this, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at me and I saw a question in her eyes. "Can Mom watch us dance?" she asked, her voice small but brave. My heart nearly exploded with pride. This courageous little girl was offering her mother a gift, the chance to see her joy, to witness her magic. "Would you like that?" I asked Victoria. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. We went up to Emily's room, and I could feel Victoria's amazement as she took in the colorful space her daughter had created. The drawings on the walls, the books scattered everywhere, the evidence of a rich inner life that Victoria had somehow missed. "It's beautiful," Victoria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Emily beamed with pride. "I drew all of these. This one is my favorite." She pointed to a drawing of a woman and child dancing together. "It's you and me, from when I was little." Victoria's face crumpled like paper. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," Emily said simply. "I remember when you used to sing to me before you got sad." The honesty in Emily's voice hit Victoria like a physical blow. She sank onto the reading nook, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered. "I'm so sorry I stopped singing. I stopped seeing you." Emily moved closer to her mother, the scarf trailing behind her like a silver blue river. There was no judgment in her face, only love and understanding that seemed far too mature for an 8-year-old. "It's okay," she said softly. "Grace taught me that sometimes people forget how to be happy, but they can remember." Victoria looked at her daughter with wonder. "When did you get so wise?" Emily giggled, and the sound was like music itself. "I've always been wise. You just forgot how to listen." I put on our playlist, and Emily immediately began to move, the scarf flowing around her like liquid music. But this time, she danced toward her mother, offering the other end of the silk fabric. "Dance with us?" Emily asked, her voice hopeful but prepared for rejection. Victoria stared at the scarf, then at her daughter's hopeful face. "I don't know how. Grace will teach us," Emily said confidently. "She's a good teacher." Victoria took the scarf with trembling hands, and I guided them through simple movements. At first, Victoria was stiff, self-conscious, afraid of doing something wrong, but gradually, something beautiful happened. She began to relax, her shoulders dropped, her breathing deepened. And when Emily spun under the scarf, creating a tunnel of silk, Victoria actually laughed, a sound so rusty and unused that it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "She's so graceful," Victoria whispered to me, as Emily danced between us. "How did I miss that? How did I miss so much?" "You were protecting yourself," I said gently. "Sometimes when we're hurt, we build walls so high we can't see over them anymore." Victoria's eyes met mine, and I saw recognition there. She understood that I wasn't just talking about her relationship with Emily. We danced through 3 songs, and with each one, the walls came down a little more. Victoria began to experiment with movement, following Emily's lead, letting her daughter teach her things she'd forgotten she ever knew. When the music finally ended, Emily threw herself into her mother's arms. "I missed you, Mommy," she whispered. Victoria held her daughter tight, both of them crying now. "I missed you too, baby. I missed you so much." I started to leave to give them privacy. But Emily called out, "Don't go, Grace. You're part of our dance family now." Victoria looked at me over Emily's head, and I saw something new in her expression. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper, too. Something that made my heart race. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving her back to me, for giving us back to each other." As I watched mother and daughter hold each other in that colorful room full of music and possibility, I realized that I'd found something too. I'd found a family that needed me as much as I needed them. The transformation in the Hale household over the next few weeks was nothing short of miraculous. What had once been a silent mausoleum became a home filled with music, laughter, and the sound of dancing feet on marble floors. Victoria started working from home more often, drawn by the sound of music and laughter that now filled the mansion, like sunlight streaming through windows that had been closed too long. She'd appear in Emily's doorway during our dance sessions, sometimes just watching with wonder, sometimes joining in when Emily pulled her into our circle with gentle insistence. Emily bloomed under her mother's attention like a flower finally getting water after a drought. She talked more, laughed more, and her drawings evolved from solitary figures to families dancing together. She even started leaving little notes for Victoria, drawings with messages like, "I love you, Mom," and "Thank you for dancing," that Victoria would find tucked into her laptop bag or taped to her bathroom mirror. But it was the changes in Victoria that took my breath away. She started wearing softer clothes on the days she worked from home, jeans and sweaters, instead of sharp suits that looked like armor. She asked Emily about her drawings, really listened to the answers with the focus she usually reserved for board meetings, and even hung some of them in her home office. The Ice Queen was melting, revealing the warm, loving mother who'd been frozen underneath layers of fear and guilt. And she started talking to me not just about cleaning schedules or Emily's needs, but real conversations about music, about Emily's progress, about the challenges of balancing work and motherhood, about dreams she'd forgotten she used to have. "I used to dance," she told me one afternoon while Emily napped. We were sitting in the kitchen sharing coffee like friends instead of employer and employee. Before marriage, before the company, before everything got so complicated, I loved it. "What happened?" I asked gently, watching the way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. Victoria stared into the dark liquid like it held answers to questions she'd stopped asking years ago. Life, expectations. My ex-husband thought dancing was frivolous, said I needed to focus on serious things if I wanted to be taken seriously in business. My heart ached for her. "And you believed him." "I believed a lot of things that weren't true," she said quietly. About success, about what Emily needed, about what I was capable of as a mother, about what mattered. And now she looked toward the stairs where Emily's room was, and her face softened with an expression I'd never seen before. "Now I think maybe the most important things can't be measured in quarterly reports." One evening, something unprecedented happened. Victoria asked me to stay for dinner. "Emily's been asking," she said, but I could see in her eyes that it wasn't just Emily's idea. There was something vulnerable in her expression, something hopeful and terrified at the same time. I should have said no, should have maintained professional boundaries, remembered that she was my employer and I was just the help. But the hope in Emily's face when Victoria extended the invitation made it impossible to refuse. Dinner was a revelation. Emily chattered about her day, showed us new drawings, and even convinced Victoria to tell stories about her own childhood. I learned that Victoria had grown up poor, that she'd built her company from nothing, that her success had come at the cost of almost everything else she'd valued. "I thought if I could give Emily everything I never had," Victoria said while Emily played with her dessert, "she'd be happy. But I gave her everything except what she actually needed." "Which was?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Me, present, engaged, willing to see her for who she really is instead of trying to fix what I thought was broken." After dinner, Emily asked if we could all dance together in the living room, the formal space that had never seen anything as joyful as music and movement. Victoria hesitated. "In there? But it's so perfect," Emily finished. "It needs dancing, Mom. It's too sad without it." So, we moved the coffee table aside and filled that pristine room with music and laughter. Emily spun between us. Victoria gradually relaxed into the rhythm, and I felt something shift in the air around us. We weren't just dancing anymore. We were creating something new, a family dynamic that included all three of us in ways that should have felt wrong, but felt completely right. When Emily finally got tired, Victoria carried her upstairs for bed. I started to gather my things, assuming the evening was over, but Victoria returned and found me putting on my coat. "Don't go yet," she said softly. "Please." I stopped, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. "I wanted to thank you," Victoria continued, moving closer, "for everything you've given us, given me." "I didn't do anything special," I said, though my voice came out breathier than intended. "You saw us," Victoria said simply, "really saw us, and you helped us see each other." We stood there in the living room where we'd just been dancing, the air thick with something unspoken. Victoria was close enough that I could smell her perfume, see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Grace," she whispered, and my name on her lips sounded like a prayer. I knew I should step back, maintain boundaries, remember that she was my employer, and this was dangerous territory. But when Victoria reached up and touched my cheek with gentle fingers, I couldn't move. "Is this okay?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Victoria's thumb traced along my cheekbone, and I felt something inside me crack open. All the walls I'd built around my heart, all the reasons I'd convinced myself that someone like her could never care for someone like me, crumbled in that moment. "I don't want this evening to end," Victoria whispered. "Then don't let it," I said softly. We stood there for a long moment, the space between us charged with possibility. Then Victoria smiled, that real warm smile that transformed her entire face. "Would you like some wine?" she asked. "We could sit by the fireplace, talk more." I nodded, and Victoria led me to the cozy seating area I dusted 100 times, but never sat in. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than my weekly salary. But when she handed it to me, all I could think about was the way her fingers brushed mine. We talked until midnight, sharing stories about our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. Victoria told me about the loneliness of success, about the guilt she carried over Emily's struggles, about the way she'd forgotten who she was beneath the CEO persona. I told her about growing up poor, about my mother's death, about the way I'd always felt invisible until I started working for her family. "You're not invisible," Victoria said softly. "You're the most present person I've ever met. You see everything, feel everything. It's beautiful." When I finally left that night, my heart was singing with possibility. Everything was about to change. The next few days passed in a haze of stolen glances and meaningful conversations that felt like dancing. Even when we were standing still, Victoria found excuses to be in whatever room I was cleaning, and I found myself taking longer with tasks just to extend our time together. Emily noticed. Of course, children always do. "Grace makes Mom smile different," she told me one afternoon while we were dancing. "Happy smile, not work smile." "What do you think about that?" I asked carefully, wondering how much an 8-year-old could understand about the complicated feelings growing between her mother and me. Emily considered this with the seriousness only a child could bring to matters of the heart. She stopped spinning and looked at me with those wise brown eyes. "I think Mom needs more happy smiles," she said finally. "And I think you need a family." The wisdom in her words took my breath away. This little girl who everyone thought was locked in her own world saw everything with crystal clarity. That evening, Victoria asked me to stay late again. Emily was having a sleepover at her friend Sarah's house, her first ever, and Victoria seemed nervous about being alone in the big house. "I thought maybe we could cook dinner together," she said, her cheeks flushing pink. "I mean, if you don't have other plans." I didn't. I never had other plans. My life outside this house was small and lonely, filled with empty evenings and the kind of silence that made you forget the sound of your own voice. We made pasta from scratch, something I'd never done before. Victoria was surprisingly good in the kitchen, her movements efficient and graceful. She told me she'd learned to cook as a child, helping her mother stretch meals to feed 4 kids on almost nothing. "Success is strange," she said as we worked side by side, our shoulders occasionally brushing. "You spend so long wanting things you can't afford, and then when you can finally buy anything, nothing tastes as good as those simple meals from when you had nothing." "Maybe because you were cooking with love," I suggested. Victoria stopped stirring the sauce and looked at me. "Is that what we're doing now?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning and possibility. "I hope so," I whispered. Victoria's smile could have powered the entire mansion. Dinner was perfect. Homemade pasta, wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and conversation that flowed like we'd been doing this for years. Victoria told me about her dreams before the company consumed her life, about wanting to travel and write and maybe teach children to dance. I shared stories about my childhood, my struggles, my hopes for the future that I'd almost stopped believing in. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Victoria said as we cleaned dishes together, our shoulders bumping in the kitchen that had become so familiar. "After the divorce, after everything fell apart, I convinced myself that love was a luxury I couldn't afford. And now?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Victoria turned to face me, her eyes serious. "Now I think maybe love is the only thing that actually matters." We moved to the living room, our dancing room, and Victoria put on soft music. But instead of dancing, we sat on the couch close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Grace," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask you something." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "This thing between us," she continued, her hands fidgeting with her wine glass. "I'm not imagining it, am I?" "No," I said softly. "You're not imagining it." Victoria sat down her glass and turned to face me fully. "I know it's complicated. I know there are boundaries we're crossing. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel is just gratitude." My heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "What do you feel?" I asked. Victoria reached for my hands, holding them gently. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking for years. And you woke me up. I feel like I've been holding my breath. And you taught me how to breathe again." She paused, searching my face. "I feel like I'm falling in love with you, Grace Miller. And it terrifies me." The words I'd been afraid to hope for hung in the air between us like music waiting to be danced to. "Why does it terrify you?" I whispered. "Because I don't want to mess this up," Victoria said, tears gathering in her eyes. "You've given me my daughter back. You've given me myself back. What if I ruin it by wanting more?" I freed one of my hands and cupped her cheek, feeling the softness of her skin, the dampness of her tears. "You're not going to ruin anything," I said firmly. "And you're not asking for too much." "I'm not, Victoria," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've been falling in love with you since that first day you danced with Emily. Watching you discover joy again, seeing you become the mother Emily always needed. How could I not fall in love with that?" Victoria's breath caught. "You love me?" "I love you," I confirmed and watched her face transform with wonder. "Even though I'm your employer, even though this is complicated and messy and—" I silenced her with a gentle finger against her lips. "Especially because it's complicated and messy," I said. "Real love isn't neat and tidy. It's beautiful chaos." Victoria leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. "What do we do now?" "Now we figure it out together," I said. "All 3 of us." "Emily," Victoria whispered. "What if she doesn't understand? What if this confuses her?" "Emily sees everything," I reminded her. "She already knows how we feel about each other. She's just waiting for us to catch up." Victoria laughed through her tears. "When did my 8-year-old daughter become wiser than me?" "The moment you started listening to her," I said. We sat there, holding each other as the fire crackled and the music played softly around us. Outside, the world continued spinning. But inside this room, time felt suspended. "I want to kiss you," Victoria whispered against my forehead. "Then kiss me," I whispered back. And she did. Soft and gentle and full of promise. Like the first dance of a song that would last forever. When we finally broke apart, Victoria smiled. That radiant smile that made everything else fade away. "Stay with me tonight," she asked. "Just to hold each other. I don't want this feeling to end." I nodded and we curled up together on the couch, listening to music and talking until dawn painted the sky pink and gold. For the first time in years, neither of us felt alone. 3 months had passed since that first kiss, and the Hale mansion had become something I'd never expected. Home. The transformation was complete. Not just in Emily, not just in Victoria, but in the very walls of the house that now seemed to pulse with life and love and music. Emily was thriving beyond anyone's wildest dreams. She'd started taking actual dance lessons, made friends at school who appreciated her unique way of seeing the world, and smiled so often now that Victoria joked about her cheeks hurting from grinning. The transformation was miraculous. But it wasn't just Emily who had changed. Victoria had become someone entirely different from the Ice Queen who'd hired me. She laughed easily now, hugged Emily freely, and had even started taking dance lessons herself. To keep up with my girls, she said. And my heart soared every time she included me in that phrase. Between Victoria and me, something beautiful and terrifying was growing. We'd been careful, taking things slowly, stealing moments when Emily was asleep or at school. But the connection between us was undeniable, electric, transformative. Tonight felt different from the moment I arrived. Victoria was nervous, fidgeting with her jewelry in a way that reminded me of Emily when she was working up courage to try a new dance move. "Emily staying at Sarah's again," Victoria said as I hung up my coat. "I thought maybe we could have dinner together, just us. I have something important to tell you." My stomach fluttered with nerves and anticipation. "I'd love that." Victoria had cooked again, something that still amazed me. This powerful CEO, who could command boardrooms but chose to make homemade meals for me. We ate by candlelight, talking about Emily's progress, about Victoria's decision to delegate more at work, about the small moments that had become precious to both of us. "Grace," Victoria said as we finished dessert, her voice serious. "There's something I need to tell you." I set down my fork, my stomach suddenly tight with nerves. "I've been thinking about us," Victoria continued, her hands trembling slightly. "About what this is, what it means, where it's going." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I know we've been taking things slowly," she said, "being careful because of Emily, because of the situation, because of all the reasons this is complicated. But," I prompted gently. Victoria stood and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where Emily often played. "But I can't pretend anymore that this is just casual, that you're just someone who works for me who I happen to care about." She turned back to face me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm in love with you, Grace. Completely, utterly, irrevocably in love with you, and I need you to know that." My heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "I love how you see Emily," Victoria continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I love how you helped me remember who I used to be. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you make everything feel possible again." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I love the way you dance, the way you laugh, the way you make our house feel like a home. I love you, Grace Miller, and I can't keep pretending that's not the most important thing in my world." I stood slowly, my legs shaky. "Victoria, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest about what this is for me." "I love you too," I said, and watched her face transform with relief and joy. "I've been in love with you for months. I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that someone like you could never really love someone like me," I admitted. "Afraid that this was too good to be true." Victoria closed the distance between us, cupping my face in her hands. "Grace, you are the best thing that's ever happened to me, to us. You saved my family." "We saved each other," I corrected. Victoria leaned forward and I thought she was going to kiss me. But before our lips could meet, we heard a sound that made us both freeze. The front door opening. "Mom, Grace, I'm home." Emily's voice echoed through the house, followed by the sound of small feet running across marble floors. Victoria and I stepped apart, both of us flushed and breathing hard. "I thought she was staying at Sarah's," I whispered. "So did I," Victoria said, running her hands through her hair. Emily appeared in the dining room doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair mussed from sleep. She was carrying her stuffed elephant and looked like she'd been crying. "Emily," Victoria said, immediately moving toward her daughter. "What are you doing here? What happened?" "I missed you," Emily said simply. "Sarah's mom brought me home. I told her I needed to be with my family." She looked between us, taking in our flushed faces, our proximity, the romantic dinner setup with its flickering candles and empty wine glasses. "Are you having a date?" she asked with 8-year-old directness. Victoria and I looked at each other, both of us uncertain how to answer. We'd been so careful to keep our growing relationship private, not wanting to confuse Emily or complicate her world. "Emily," Victoria started, but Emily held up her small hand. "It's okay, Mom," she said with that wisdom that never failed to amaze me. "I know you love Grace, and Grace loves you. I can see it when you look at each other." Victoria knelt down to Emily's level, her voice gentle. "How do you feel about that, sweetheart?" Emily considered this seriously, tilting her head the way she did when she was thinking through a complex dance move. Then she smiled, that radiant smile that could light up the world. "Happy," she said simply. "Grace makes you smile the way dancing makes me smile, and she makes our house feel like a real family." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You're okay with Grace and me being together?" Emily nodded enthusiastically. "Can Grace live with us now, like a real family?" Victoria looked at me over Emily's head, her expression hopeful and terrified at the same time. "That's up to Grace," Victoria said softly. Emily turned to me, her brown eyes bright with hope. "Will you stay with us, Grace? Will you be part of our family for real?" I looked at this beautiful little girl who taught me about courage, and at her mother who taught me about love, and felt my heart overflow with certainty. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "If you'll have me, I'd love to be part of your family." Emily squealed with delight and launched herself into my arms. Victoria joined our hug, and we stood there in the dining room, holding each other tight. "Can we dance now?" Emily asked, pulling back to look at both of us. "All three of us together like a real family." Victoria and I looked at each other and smiled. "Always," Victoria said. "We'll always dance together." Emily ran to put on music, and Victoria took my hand. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "About us? About all of it?" I squeezed her hand and smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Emily returned with her favorite playlist, and we moved to the living room, our dancing room, where everything had started. As the music began, Emily took both our hands, creating a circle of love and movement and joy. We danced until Emily fell asleep on the couch, until the music ended, until the sun began to rise on our new beginning. We danced our way into love, into family, into the kind of happiness that makes everything else fade away. And we never stopped dancing. 1 year later, Emily performed her first solo dance recital. In the front row sat her two biggest fans, her mother Victoria and Grace, who was no longer just the maid, but the woman who taught them both that love, like dancing, is about feeling the music in your heart and letting your body follow. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe for more emotional stories, and tell me in the comments what's the most beautiful act of kindness you've ever witnessed. Your story might inspire our next video.